Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments, midweek model meet. So, good evening, everybody. I am slightly stressed, must be said. As you can probably see, our boxes are packed. As I can see, there's an awful lot of stuff that isn't packed as well. So yeah, I am at the moment wondering how it's all going to get done by tomorrow night. Fortunately, the moving company we're using is a small local firm, which I kind of believe in, supporting small local firms if you can. It would be a bit hypocritical of me if I didn't, really, having a small model shop. But really nice guy, and they're actually going to help us. They're going to pack the shed, which is fantastic. So don't have to worry about that. So they're going to come over tomorrow, pack up the shed, take a load of other stuff, so they can get a head start on Friday, and that'll clear some stuff out for us to do that. So this will be a little bit of a shorter stream because of that, because I still have to go to B&M and get a load of crates. Because although we've got plenty of boxes, those crates are kind of useful for model stuff, especially for other things. They're kind of quite handy because they stack, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So yeah, it's going to be something, I can say. Also, we do have fiber broadband available at the new property, which is great, but I'm not getting connected till the 8th of January. So that's a little bit of a problem in terms of doing streams, etc. So obviously I do have broadband at the shop, so I'm probably going to have to use that, and it's not great. So you'll have to watch this space to see what happens with the channel over the next couple of weeks, which is unfortunate because I want to do the 12 days of Modelmas. So those of you who haven't seen, I'm doing 12 days of Modelmas starting on the day I move on the 13th, because 12 plus 13 is 24, counting the 13th as one. So that'll take us right the way up to Christmas. And on the 24th, I'll be giving away a 3D printer, an Elegoo Mars resin printer. It's new, kind of. So it is mine. So in that respect, it is secondhand, but I've never used it. So yeah, I took it out of the box, and that's all I've done. I've not even calibrated it. I don't think I've even switched it on. So so it's not like I'm just getting rid of my old crap. It is it's kind of an entry-level resin printer. So if you want to know how to get in touch to sort of apply for those, I put a community post up a few days ago on each of them. So from the 13th, basically you just have to share the post and comment with the link. If you're a channel member, you also get additional entries based on your membership level. So it's open to anybody. So as long as you're a subscriber, which is free, and I should say 65% of you are not subscribed. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. It really, really helps the channel. I'm sure you hear this on every single YouTube, but the reason that every single YouTuber says this is because it's true. So if you can sub to the channel, that would be great. I am a smidge away from 25,000 subscribers, and it would be great if I could get 25,000 by the end of the year. I think I'm on, let's see, what is it at this very moment? Let's have a look live on YouTube. If I can do it without messing up my stream. Because YouTube Studio, it shouldn't mess it up. 24,572. So I only need, what is that? 428. 428 subscribers in the next, what have we got till 31 days in December, 20 days. So it's achievable. It's certainly achievable. So it would be great to start the new year with 25,000 subs. Yes, Emma, I appreciate you can only sub once. And that is very much appreciated. But those of you who haven't subbed, or if you know somebody that might like my content and you could convince them to sub, that would be fantastic. As always, you guys are a much stronger voice than me just saying it. So anyway, that's the sales pitch, sales patter over for the moment. But of course, it's a good time to sub because I'm giving away shit. Okay. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to give away yet. I've kind of been just focused on packing for this week. So it's been kind of crazy. And yeah, so I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to start Modelmas with. I've got some kind of ideas in the back of my head, but I want to try and be as creative as possible, which is, a little challenging when you've got, stressed on all sorts of other levels. The other thing that happened this week, which I thought was quite amusing, was, Hornby sent me a pack, and it was kind of like, tell me you don't want me to win your competition without telling me you don't want me to win your competition. So it was obviously for the Model Shop of the Year, which I think is, given Hornby's sort of stealth promotion of DTC and kind of, going against their customers, both on the rail and, the model side and stuff, I feel is a little bit in poor taste. And I put that on a post a while ago. But some of you very kindly nominated me. I don't think I am my shop is the best model shop in the UK. But it's great to have the nomination. And I got a pack to promote that and get people to vote for me. You may have seen Jadlan put out some emails on that. I got the pack yesterday, which and voting ends this Friday. So it's like 3 days, and this is physical media to promote stuff. And it's like, okay, so I talked about problems with Hornby before, right? From a commercial point of view, that's insane, right? They gave me, I don't know, I don't have the pack here because it's packed up somewhere. I think it's in my car at the moment. But it was a box about this big. It was about an ICM sort of small box big, a little bit thicker, and it was full with like little cards, business cards, like each about stacked that high, about 3 of those, a whole bunch of physical poster things, little pop-up cards signed, all quite nice, nicely made. A little hanging thing to put on the door. 3 days. 3 days to distribute all that. It's just like, to make a difference. It's like, come on. It's like, if that was a month before the close of the competition, yeah, I can get that. I could get 3 of those, no problem. But 3 days, really, it's just very silly. So, wasting, I consider that a complete waste of money on Hornby's side, because somebody had to design those. I mean, obviously they probably farmed it out, but somebody was in charge of it. They had to produce it, they had to pay for it, they had to mail it. It's like, I would rather have a discount on my next order, as a trader, as a retailer. But anyway, that was one thing that happened today, or yesterday. I also had a phone conversation with Games Workshop. Games Workshop called me and said, obviously they're doing a drive to get more retailers, independent retailers, into Warhammer and reaching out to model shops and stuff. The guy was very nice, and obviously I've known Warhammer probably since before the guy was born. He was quite a young chap. But really pleasant. We had a conversation. It's like, yeah. And they sent me an introductory pack, which has some Space Marines and some Tyranids in, and Tyranids. Some people say it that way. Benefits of having games, which, I mean, I've got a phone conversation with him booked for the 16th to talk about the commercial stuff, because I'm very wary about the stories I've heard with Games Workshop. And yes, I know they're very successful. They, potentially different footfall for the and different impressions for the shop. But I don't want any demands on my business. So we shall see. Right? But it was quite nice to be approached, even if I say no, I did ask Gary if he could come on tonight. Unfortunately, he's got I say unfortunately, fortunately for his friend, he's got a personal matter that a friend reached out to him for. I won't say what it is because it's personal. And Gary obviously has to, as any good friend does, be there for his friend. So probably won't be on tonight. And I did ask Jamie if he could come on, but he's up at 5 and doing some stuff. In a couple of weeks, he said he'll be free, but so maybe we'll get him in then. But tonight it's just going to be me by my lonesome, which is probably good if I'm going to end early. I think John Alec, who has just come in, hi John, is going to pop in a little bit. But yeah, it's going to be a slightly truncated midweek model meet. But I thought it was worth doing because I need a break from packing. Because it's driving me insane. Oh my God. So it may be a while before I manage to get consistent content, especially streaming back out with the the broadband thing. So we'll have to see how that works, because the shop internet connection isn't great. I don't know whether it supports streaming. Hopefully it will support uploading videos, because I've got some really interesting things, or at least I think they're interesting, for you guys coming up, which I suppose brings me to some of my next topics, which is paint. I've been spending a lot of time with paint, spent a lot of time talking about paint recently, probably over the last 6 months actually, and some of what I've said caused some upset in some people that didn't really understand what they were talking about, mentioning no names, but they are American, and belong to a certain critique group. I may head it. But I've also had great support from other scientists who were also in this hobby. Brent from Goobertown Hobbies actually got in touch after watching the video, which again, it's always nice to be recognized by fellow creators that have a larger and different audience. So that was nice. But also in the recent mixing ICM videos, a few people have reached out to me as well. One of them being Finsbury Phil. I did actually check with them both just to make sure that they were okay with me mentioning their names, who bought me the Ammo Atom paints, the 2 basic wargaming sets, and the RAF late war fighter one, 4 colors. So I tried those, so I'll give you some of my thoughts on those. And also a viewer called Casey, who is the C, who I mentioned in the RLM ICM mixing video, obviously reached out to me with the spectrophotometric data. We've actually talked quite a lot over the past couple of days. That's good distraction activity from packing it. Because he's actually written a Python script, which, and I'm not a Python person at all. I have no experience with it. I installed it last night, managed to run the script and everything. I'm a fast learner, I'll give it a go. But it's not my chosen specialized subject, as it were. So anyway, he reached out and we were talking about paints and mixing, and so some interesting stuff that he's been doing. Tamiya paints are one of the things he's looked at, Tamiya paints. So I'm going to be doing a similar series as I'm doing for ICM with Tamiya paints, which I think again may have wider appeal just because of Tamiya's familiarity and the length of time in the market, even though ICM paints are better for brush painting. But of course, if you're spray painting, Tamiya have that edge there, and you want to do acrylic aqueous suspension spraying. Also, on that note, I got some, they're quite heavy. I got some little early Christmas presents for myself. So this You can see it's quite difficult because it's very shiny. This is a Hegman gauge. You can see it's got 100 at the top, all the way down to 0 at the bottom. So if I can get it to focus a bit better there. And what this does is there is a channel. You can probably just see, if I tilt it to the side, you can just see there's a groove here. And it gradually gets shallower. So at the top here, this is 100 microns, so 1/10 of a millimeter deep. Okay, and it goes all the way down to 0. And what this is used for is for measuring the particle size, the grind size of paints. So you put a drop of paint, or you kind of put a line of paint across here, and you use this little scrapery thing. You basically put it down and you push it across. Because this is a valley, what happens is if the particles are small enough to sit in that valley and have the thing go over them, then they stay. The excess paint obviously gets pushed along, and kind of it gets to the point where obviously the particle sizes are too big to stay in the channel, or this goes over them, and then it feathers out. So you get a streak of where the particle size is. So we'll go solid up until the particle sizes start to get too big, and then it'll go a streak across. So that gives you a particle size distribution for your paint. So I'm going to be showing that on some paints and how that affects the properties of those paints. So and there's really obvious things like metallics. So they have quite coarse grinds, and often because you're adding mica, so a lot of the cheaper metallics will add mica, and those are quite big particles. So they come in, I've got 3 of them here. So this one is a 0 to 50, and then I've also got a 0 to 25 micron. So you can see this, you can barely even feel. So obviously, if you do this and your paint goes all the way down to 10, then you're probably going straight to go to the 25 to get the more accurate sort of range of particle size distributions. So I've already tried some Tamiya paints, some ICM paints, some Humbrol, some Outlaw, and it's interesting to see the results. So that's kind of some of what's been going on in the background. Now let me stop for 2 minutes and just go back up to the top and just say hello to everyone. So in tonight we have we've got Mystery Box Nick, welcome. David Markey, can't even speak tonight. World War II Scale Models Dave, good evening. Got Michael Myers. We have Taggers, good to see you. We have Edward Williams, nice to see you. Adrian Hook, got some good regulars coming in, always nice to see. Got Models by Shaky, hello. John Christmas, good to see you. Paul Christopher, Indy R1, Stuart, Julian Hall, and Craig Dukes, good to see you. Got Phil. We've got Frank Holder, who has a question. I shall come to that in a second. We've got Gary from Graham's Modeling Mayhem. George Davis. Hopefully I've not missed anyone. James Fisher. Mario Saliba, good to see you, Mario. Got Hayden, nice to see you. Rubbish Modeler. I like the name. I'll come to your question as well in a little bit. Rob, good evening. Emma Bird, good to see you too. And Be on Scale Models. Got quite a crowd in. John Alec, good to see you. Hopefully you can join shortly. And Andy Bowden, Hobby Time, Keith, Frank Holder, I think I already mentioned. Too many people for me to remember all the names. That's the problem. Jesse Lomas, Blind Dutchman, good to see you, Dave. And I think that brings us up to the present. So welcome, everybody. Good to see both familiar names and some ones I've not seen before. That's always good. Everybody's welcome. You know, I like having a good crowd on. It's good to see regulars. It's good to see people who haven't been here before or haven't commented before. If you do want to ask a question or comment, please put it in capital letters or QQQ in capitals, just so that I can pick it out easily. Otherwise, you know, if it's just me and I'm looking through, or even if I've got somebody else on that I'm usually chatting to, so I'm distracted, it just helps me sort of pull it out. So let me just go back, because there were a couple of questions as I went through those chat comments. Frank Holder, question to all. Me and my brother have been making models now for almost 26 years, but he's announced he's going to sell all his stuff and quit. How do I convince him to change his mind? Please help. I mean, that's a difficult one, right? Because someone's made their mind up. It's difficult to convince them otherwise. And in a way, you know, if he's already made that decision, should you try and change his mind? I don't know. I would try and put it, if it was me and my brother, I don't have a brother, but if I did, I would say, why don't you actually just put it away, put it in the loft, just leave it for 6 months and see. Because if you miss it in 6 months and it's in the loft, you can go back to it really easily. If you sell it all in 6 months, you need to start again. You may not even be able to buy all the stuff that you've already got, because models especially go out of production. You know, Airfix have this thing where they make it Seeking, for instance, the HAS1. You can't buy that now, the 48 scale. You can buy the Jungly, but that you can't build the HAS and HC versions out of that box. They don't have those sprues in. So for me, I would say, you know, just rather than trying to convince him not to quit, just try to go the halfway bit and just say, you know, just chill. Also, why? You know, if you know why he's going to quit, is it time? Is it expense? Is it, you know, family? Does he feel he's not progressing? You know, there's lots of different things that you can do there. But I would say have a, you know, if you can convince him to have a pause rather than quit, that at least gives you time. It gives him time to cogitate, because I think we've all felt that, like, oh, you know, I'm going to quit. I don't want to do this anymore. You lose your mojo or whatever. But it comes back, right? So if you can convince him not to make a hasty decision, then that's probably the best outcome, I would say. Right. Other questions that came up. What is the move all about? So it's the banks being bastards, as usual. So basically, our fixed rate mortgage came to an end back in the end of the summer, sometime in the summer. And our mortgage went up over £200 a month, which, with me not having the role I had before, if I was still, you know, chief commercial officer of a genetics diagnostic company or Northern Europe regional leader for Thermo Fisher, it wouldn't have been an issue, right? As a self-employed consultant and shop owner, that's the problem, right? It's the scale of income. So we decided to sell and get it and downsize, basically. And actually, although we're downsizing, we're only losing a downstairs toilet, which the new place doesn't have. Well, so what? We hardly use it. And the dining room, but we gain a conservatory, so it's kind of, they're the same. We've got a really big bathroom at the moment, which again, we only use the shower and the sink and the loo, so we don't really need that. So we're not actually losing much. It's got a garage, the same as this has a garage, so I still have a man cave. It doesn't have a shed, but it does have like a covered area. It's got a garden. It's not as big as this one, but Pablo's quite small, so he doesn't really need a big garden. He doesn't like the wet. So the good thing is it's in the same place as the shop. It's in Wincanton. So I can put all my efforts into the shop that I haven't been able to do for the last 3 months or so. Has been, well, maybe 6 months actually, because part of it as well was my financial settlement for my divorce was taking ages. My ex-wife really dragged her feet on it, and that meant that if I'd released those funds from my other house, then it would have taken pressure off a little bit, but it wouldn't really have changed the outcome. So we've actually managed to get a place now, and because we couldn't port the mortgage, even though we thought we could, Halifax decided that they wouldn't let us, for no real good reason, and they wouldn't make as much money out of us. So we've managed to beg, borrow, scrape, and steal enough money to actually cash purchase. We're selling this house and putting to Maria's dipped into savings she's got in Barcelona, or had in Barcelona. She doesn't have any more. I borrowed some money off my mum, taken out of my pension, but we will be mortgage free. So it's been super, super stressful. It's been a real mess. I'm still stressed about the move because it doesn't seem we've got enough time. But once we're in, the pressure will ease massively, and I'm looking forward to that aspect. So that's what it's all about. So it's one of those things, you've got to look at the silver lining, because there've been a fair few clouds this year. It hasn't been, not quite an annus horribilis like the Queen had that year, but it's not been the best of years. It's kind of had ups and downs. 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, as my mother would say. And dealing with solicitors, even if Maria works at the firm that's conveyancing for us, I wouldn't use them again. Honestly, unless something has drastically changed, they take a very pedantic view. Unless money laundering laws have changed dramatically in the 4.5 years since we bought this place, the evidence you need to provide is staggering. To get £8,000 off your mum, it's as though you're Pablo Escobar trying to import drugs into the country. It's utterly stupid. But anywho, enough of my problems. Mario, you got your Tarka paints. You smell like my old grand's sweaty socks. It's strange, isn't it, how some paints, like Vallejo, I can't say it how Maria says it, Vallejo. I should have got her to record actually how she says it, and I could put it on. I've got a stream deck. I haven't actually connected it up here. When I moved and get it set up, I'll have my stream deck checked up for live streams, so I can have applause, and I'll have her saying in a proper Spanish, Vallejo Acrylicos, and then I can just press a button. But I love the smell of Vallejo paints. I think they're really nice. I quite like the smell of Tamiya paints as well. ICM paints are quite nice for the most part, but their greys are just like kind of a bit, what's the word? Bausty, I think would be the word. Almost like they've gone off, like gone mouldy. It's like there's kind of that smell to them, which is like, you can always tell if you've opened a grey rather than open a blue, for instance. But Hataka, yeah. Hataka are funny. So there's a couple of things, right? Hataka have pretty decent paint matches for the subjects they do. But I can't get them to spray well. I can get them to spray. I did the Spitfire, my 124 Spitfire with Hataka. But those paints fought me all the way. They did not make it easy at all. The results were decent, but yeah, they wouldn't be my first go-to choice Hataka paints because of that. Whereas, well, I'll come to Spanish paints in a minute. Julian, I think there should be separate categories for chain stores who can throw money into competition and bands who can't. Yeah, well, you know. Anybody who saw my appearance on Airfix and Chill on Monday will know that I have particular views on competitions. And again, I think this goes for any activity, right? And the critical part of me, the critical thinker, the one that sat in all those business meetings would always be like, why? You know, why are we doing this? You know, what is the point? Because in business, that's really important, right? Because everything in business costs money. And if you're not getting a return on investment for it, you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah, if you don't have a rationale, if you're just doing it because you've always done it or other people do it, you know, it's like, that's not a reason. I once had this discussion with a marketing manager who was talking about going to this show. And I was like, why are we going? You know, we don't get any new leads from it. People just complain about us being there. You know, they use it as a customer service event almost. You know, it's not like we were one of the most well-known brands in the sector we were in. It's not like we're doing it for PR. So why are we spending £75,000 on a exhibition for 3 days? Just why? It didn't have a good answer. So yeah, I mean, I think the Humbrol competition, I mean, why they're doing it, I'm not really sure what the answer to that is. Oh, sorry, I've already put that one up. Sorry, Frank. Hopefully the answer was adequate. So particle size in paints, it doesn't affect the look because we're talking about the difference in microns, right? What it does affect is flow, and well, it's mainly flow, and it can affect the look depending on, you know, if it's a matte or a gloss or semi-gloss. If you've got irregular paint particle sizes, for instance, that's difficult to form a gloss finish if you've got that, unless you've got some sort of filler in there that can, you know, even that out, because otherwise it's going to be irregular. The whole thing, the reason something looks matte, sorry, is because you've got an irregular surface, so you get non-specular reflection. So the particle size is more about how well it flows, especially through an airbrush. So one of the reasons metallics don't airbrush very well is because their particle size is big. And that's why really you shouldn't use metallics in an airbrush that you can use for anything else, really. I mean, I do it. I've done it. But you shouldn't really. But obviously, I'll get into all that in the video. Don't want to spoil that. Oh, Robert, I think I missed you. Hello, for Ontario, Canada. Hello. I did see. I'm sure I saw. Oh, Celtic, nice to see you. Lurking. Sure, I saw another question. Okay, so Frank, he won't wait. Frank, do you know why he's quitting? What's driven the decision? Because generally, if somebody makes a very, definitive change like that, something's driving it. Something has happened that does that. But it will be a shame, because if you've modeled with your brother for 26 years is a long time. It's a bit like anything, if you were golfing together or going down to the pub and they suddenly stop, you lose that. So I do feel for you. In the R1 says, I used the Autotech primer on some Tamiya rubber tracks. I'm finding it's just flaking off. I was using Humboldt primer previously and that seemed fine. Have you found this with rubber? The rubber tracks, anything will flake off eventually, because vinyl isn't designed to be painted in that way. And you can get specialized primers to go on that sort of stuff. The problem is that they're not that great on other surfaces like the plastic. So yeah, it's one of the reasons that a lot of people don't like rubber tracks, is because they are difficult to paint and keep paint on. I'm surprised you didn't have a problem with Humboldt primer, to be honest. But I don't know which Humboldt primer you were using, whether it was the enamel or the if it was enamel, then yeah, that could be the reason. But yeah, rubber tracks are notoriously difficult, because not only if you paint them, that's one thing, but then weathering them, again, manipulating them at all. I mean, if you just got to think of the nature of the rubber, it's flexible, right? Paint generally isn't, which is why I said that there are specialized primers for that sort of thing, which have a bit more flex than vinyl paint. When you get specialized paint for painting actual tires as well, and what you'll find is it's still not that good. It doesn't last forever. So yeah, it is an issue. Yes, I am definitely looking forward to no mortgage. I mean, it's not our first choice. We were going to have a mortgage. I mean, we were going to have just 30, and this is the ridiculous thing, and I think I said this last time, and I don't want to go on about it, but our current mortgage is with Halifax. We renewed it, 5 months ago? 100 and, I think it's down, well, I mean, at the time, it would probably be like £160,000 left on the house, right, for the mortgage. And they were fine with that 5 months ago. Porting the mortgage over to the new house, where we would only require 30, they wouldn't do. So, and they said, we didn't pass their affordability. It's just like, that's bullshit. It's just like, if we can afford 150,000 in your eyes, I mean, obviously we can't, that's one of the reasons we're moving, but if we could do that in our eyes, now we're going to a 30,000, which means rather than paying £1,200 a month, we'd be paying £200 a month. It's just like, come on, really? And it's not that at all. It's because, of course, if we ported the mortgage, we wouldn't have an early redemption fee, which is like £3 and a bit grand, and they don't get much interest on a 30 grand mortgage. So it's purely that they're bastards and want to squeeze as much money out of people as possible. So, with the best will in the world and the risk of demonetization, fuck them. Which is kind of where I got to, is where I just said to Maria, look, you've got some savings. I can tap my mum, get my pension. Let's just go. It's going to be tight, but then we can hopefully build up over time. So it's a privileged position to be in. I appreciate, but I mean, I don't know what we'd do if we didn't. Exactly. Yes. And thank you. And yes, definitely, the plus side is a truncated commute to work. So I apologize for anybody that's put orders in the last couple of months that have either, I know there have been some, I've had some issues with Royal Mail that people have known about for a while, and I haven't been able to chase that as much or as thoroughly as I'd like to, because obviously this has been taking just all of my time. But from hopefully, if we get enough stuff in back by Monday the 16th, I'm going to be able to be at the shop 6 days a week. So I can really put into the shop what I want to, because there's still a huge amount of stock I've got which isn't visible online. So none of the secondhand stuff is. I've just got a big order in like 2 weeks ago. Why I did that, I don't know. But with some more stuff in, you know, some AFB Club and, you know, other things. So, you know, I want to get all of that out, and I want to really, you know, push that side. Maybe get the Games Workshop stuff in as well. Start doing the 3D printed stuff. You know, I've got all the ICM paints coming in. You know, I really want to develop the shop, and, you know, maybe I will be worthy of the Hornby Award in the future. We'll see. Anyway, let's. Yeah, you're making me jealous, John. Yes, Dave, exactly. A bit moldy. Yeah, it's the. I think it's mostly the greys that tend to do that. A lot of the blues don't seem to do that. I just noticed, obviously, because I've been using ICM paint a lot with the mixing thing, and I've noticed, and unfortunately, the greys are really useful, right? Like the neutral grey, the dark grey, sky grey. You know, they've got some really good, you know, low to high luminance greys. Yeah, and they're the ones that are a bit like. Question: what do you know about late war German camo that uses geometric shapes? Geometric shapes. Are you talking about the late war ambush camo where they use the little O's, little stencils for going over the triple color? Because the next ICM paint video I'm doing is, of course, the they're not, well, they are RAL paints, but they're basically the German AFV colors, the Wehrmacht here colors. And I'm basing a lot of it on Thomas Chory's book. He's a Czech modeler. He did a lot of research. There's a lot of paint chips in the book. It's arriving, should be Friday, of course. It's going to arrive on Friday. I've got 2 orders. I've got one for the shop arriving as well. It's going to be, oh, why do I do these things myself? But and the reason I'm doing that is, and the reason I'll explain in the video, is the RAL colors. So RAL 1001 Elfenbein, Elfbone, or ivory, is actually a different color now than it was in World War II, right? It's darker now than it was. RAL 7028 does not exist in the current RAL catalogue. And why is that? It's down to the denazification of Germany after World War II. So a lot of the RAL colours were removed or replaced, whereas others have stayed. So all the ones that have stayed, I've managed to do already, and I just want to confirm the ones that I've done, like RAL 7028, because Dunkelgelb and a lot of the references to that are wrong, wrong inverted commas, because there were I think 3 shades of RAL 7028. There were 3 or 4, I can't remember. There's also Dunkelgelb Nachtmuster, which were like sample versions of them that were often used as substitutes as well. There were, I think, 3 versions of olive grün, and I think 5 of Schokoladenbraun. Brown, I should say. So you've got 15 colors basically with all of those in various different shades. So because they were removed from the catalog, and then afterwards, you know, people were matching stuff from existing vehicles. I mean, the vehicle could have been painted in any one of like a lot of different variations. So trying to say this is RLM 7028 version 1 or 2 or 3 really hard, right? So people, it's subject of endless debate. So again, I will only go with, I'm just going to do the basic ones. I don't want to do all the variations, at least not in the first video. But in terms of how they applied it, they did a lot of different applications. If you're talking about aircraft, they tended to get away from geometric shapes towards the end of the war, less the splinter camo and more natural shapes, a lot of dappling. They did a lot of dappling anyway. So let me know, Robert, what actually you're referring to, and maybe I can give you a better answer. Paraphrasing Apocalypse Now. I love the smell of ICM paints in the morning. Well, I love the smell of Vallejo paints in the morning. Vallejo smells nice. ICM is not bad, and AK acrylic is not bad. I've tried them all, and my favorite to paint is AK real colors. Bear that thought in mind, Mario. I think modeling competitions are a contradiction. Making a model someone else's rule standards and deadline ruins enjoyed what is supposed to be enjoyable hobby. I mean, who are we to say whether it's enjoyable for someone or not? I mean, each to their own, right? Some people do like competitions because they enter them, right? And that's fine. I don't have anything against competitions per se. It's, again, as I said on Monday, it's really what it's for. And if the clarity is around that, that's fine. You know, just, I would hate for people to enter a competition under false pretenses of what it is, you know. And I don't think they encourage modelers particularly. You know, I don't think they're inspirational events for newcomers, certainly. Yeah, look, see if there's another one. Question: considering we're talking paint, the next release of the Sea King is incoming. What does the British Gulf War colour? Who does the best British Gulf War colour? I'm not sure because I've not really looked at it. So I tend to find these things out as I go. So I tend to do the research and around the stuff I'm doing. So, I mean, I've always known a fair bit about German camouflage, both aircraft and AFBs, but not as much as I've learned in the past couple of weeks for the AFBs and probably month for the other stuff. Do I really? I don't know whether I've learned too much more about the aircraft stuff other than the exact values of some of these things. But certainly the AFB stuff, I've learned some things I didn't know before. The mortgage crap sounds like computer says no. Yeah, it is. Celtic says, I think pigment's the way to go with rubber tracks. That's a good shout, actually. That is a good shout. Jesse Lomas says, I'm starting in 135th, in particular British North Africa Desert. I've seen both AK and Vallejo Airdo kits. Best one. Do you mean like paint kits, paint sets? I'm not sure is the answer. So we're up to, I'll come back to that because we're up to the present, whatever I'm trying to say. I run out of comments is what I'm saying. So what I wanted to talk to today was about Spanish paints, paint in Spain in particular, because obviously in the past week or so we have had, let me see if I can share my screen here. We've had this. 98% of workers at leading wargaming paint manufacturer Acrylics Vallejo strike. Employees at the Spanish paint titan are demanding better wages and safety conditions. And then they go through. And there's this interview with this lady. And as Vallejo are based in Barcelona now, this lady's actually Catalan. And funnily enough, so is Maria. So I actually asked her to translate this interview for me, which she did, and it seems pretty bad, I have to say. So essentially, what the workers are saying is that a lot of the equipment that they use is old, it's not maintained, and it's unsafe. There is a big differential between the working areas where they're producing the paint and the areas that the directors use. And I think, and they said about the 15% pay rise that they were looking at because they basically work for minimum wage, which is one thing, you know. But aside from that, the other quite damning thing was that she was talking about was what they want is a working sexual harassment policy, which isn't great in any decade. And in 2024, I think to have a company say that with its employees saying that, you know, they don't have a working sexual harassment policy tells you that they are people being actively harassed at the workplace, which isn't a good optic, let's face it. Safety and harassment at work are probably the two main things that would make people like leave most workplaces, I think. The other thing, well, I was going to say is like not liking your boss, but I mean, if you're being harassed by your boss, then that's kind of the same thing, right? So, yeah, it's not a great look. And when I was thinking about this, obviously I've been using ICM paints. ICM paint isn't made by ICM in terms of the raw materials. The raw materials come from Spain. And if you look at the consistency of their paint and the opacity of the paint, the closest paint to ICM paint is AK. Okay, I've got AK Gen 3 versus of that. It's extremely similar. So I think the raw materials come from AK. And then, of course, I had the Mig Ammo Atom paints sent to me. And of course, they are based literally like 20 kilometers from AK. So Vallejo, obviously based in Barcelona. AK and Mig are based in the northwest of Spain, about quite a way away from Barcelona, but still, in terms of in the country, they're in the north, sort of northeast and northwest of the country. So it struck me as really odd. It's like we've got, you know, ICM paints, which I really, really like, which are effectively AK material, AK third gen stuff, which a lot of people really like. You've got the Mig paints and various different sets, and the Atom paints that they brought out. Vallejo, which is well known as an industry standard in, certainly for brush painting in the miniature painting world, and is very well accepted in a lot of the scale modeling world, all based out of Spain. And I just thought, what is it that makes Spain such a popular or such a good place? You know, why do such a lot of paint companies, a lot of our modeling paints come from such a small area of the world? Because really, you've got, I mean, Tamiya, Mr. Hobby, obviously Japanese, you have that. So they've kind of, but they've been doing, you know, they've been modeling since the 40s, you know, so kind of that's established. They have a different sort of paint. It's, you know, primarily for spraying. You know, it's not really used by miniature hobbyists at all, you know, miniature painters. Humbrol, it's been around a long time, but nobody really rates Humbrol as an acrylic, right? The enamels, yeah, it's still quite used, quite well accepted in certainly in the rail modeling world, if not so much the scale modeling world. There are, of course, some people who've lived and died on enamels and don't see a need to move on, which is fine. But I just thought, why is it that so many of the acrylics we use are based in Spain? You know, really, we have Citadel in the mini painting world, which obviously based in the UK. but they're a very different beast. And Citadel paints aren't really used by scale modelers very much. So, yeah, I don't know what that is. So if anybody has any ideas, obviously a lot of these companies, Vallejo, for instance, started off in New York, and it was actually looking at the artistic market. So I wondered whether it was kind of coming from that artistic development side, because there's also brands like Chimera Colors, which again are European. So it just struck me as interesting. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But I thought it was quite an interesting one to just bring up and sort of pose the question. I think it's going to be covered in Airfix and Chill next Monday. One of the reasons I wanted to say it here is because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make Airfix and Chill. I just don't know if I have the internet or anything. So I thought I'd give some of my thoughts on it here. Certainly, I think the Vallejo situation is going to be spoken about on Airfix and Chill, because it does bring about the same sort of moral question of, well, should we actually be supporting Vallejo at the moment, or should we actually be supporting the rights of workers? Because the pay thing aside, what a company pays its workers, what they've agreed to work for, I think is between the workforce and the employer. That's one thing. I don't think necessarily, unless they're being paid, ridiculous wages, well under and stuff, but then people would just leave. I don't think that's necessarily something for the consumer to get involved in. But when it comes to safety and harassment, those are things that I think consumers, can have a stance on, if you like, or not. I'm saying that you should. You have every right to buy your paint and not care. That's what capitalism is about. You pay your money, you take your choice. But is it something, in today's world, when we have so many alternatives, especially from the same country, reputable providers? I know Moss, for instance, didn't or boycotted AK for quite a long time after the book that they brought out, which was very controversial at the time. They made a first version. They scaled back on it because of how it was seen. I get the point of their book. I actually bought it specifically for discussing it with Moss. The second version, obviously, and it had a lot of stuff redacted, and it was done much more tastefully. I think if they'd gone with that to start with, to challenge the kind of way we think about these things, that would have been okay. I think the way they did it to start with was crass, So, yeah, interesting things to think about, I think. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear that. I should just mention, though, thank you very much, to Dave. Dave is a pillar of the community and quite often gives memberships here and in other streams for other YouTubers. So thank you very much, Dave. Much appreciated. Those of you who haven't been members of this channel before, head over to my YouTube channel, to the community posts. There is a members only post there that gives you the access to my Discord. It's only for channel members. So Discord is the best way to get in touch with me, because I have Discord on everything, all of my computers, my phone. It's instant. It's not like email that has to download and that kind of thing. So yeah, that is fantastic. Thank you, Dave. And get on the Discord. Come say hello. I usually give little sneak peeks of stuff. I was showing the Hegman gauges earlier in the week, and I'll give updates on. I'll show some of my work in progress sometimes and stuff. There hasn't been a lot of late because, of course, I could show you some photos of boxes I've packed, but that's not terribly interesting. Oh, Beyond Scale Models says that they made paints for the cartoon producers in the 60s. Now, that's interesting. Now, was that an already established tradition then? of, they used them for the cartoon producers because they already had that heritage of paint production, or is that where they got started? So I've not read around this subject at all. I think it'd be quite an interesting one to do that with. Excuse me, getting a bit dry there. But I thought, why don't I just ask people, rather than be going to Wikipedia and something and getting some potentially dubious answers. Why don't I just ask you guys and say, what is it with Spain and paints? And are we okay with buying Vallejo now? I have a whole bunch of Vallejo paints. It's not going to make me pour it down the sink. Will I be buying any more Vallejo? Well, probably not, but that's not to do with the current situation. If I had to buy more paint, would it make me think twice about buying Vallejo? Yes, it would. But there are so many other choices now, and I prefer ICM paint to brush paint with now. So, and let's assume it's AK paint. It's cheaper than AK paint. I don't understand how it's possible, but of course, if they're buying raw materials and then bottling it, and then there's, I don't know all the ins and outs of production and things, what exactly they're supplying and stuff. But for me, ICM paint produces, it's a big enough range with enough color gamut across that range to basically be able to make anything, which is kind of what my mixing videos are about. And it's not, if you think about Tamiya, and I mentioned this when I talked about the 80 paint set that they do, ICM do. Similar number of paints in the range, but Tamiya focus on the very specific colors. But actually, they get a lot of those wrong. So, for instance, XF22 is RLM grey. It's nowhere near RLM02 grey. If you actually, here's a sneak peek, right? If you mix 50% RLM grey from Tamiya with an equal volume of XF16 flat flesh, that gets you almost perfectly. It's like within 3 point something DE of RLM02. But that's a 50% mix with a very, very different color, right? So Tamiya paints, aren't color matched very well. And so is so speaking of poor color matches, the Ammo Atom paints are terrible paint matches. Their REF set is so far off. It's bad in terms of color match. It's bad. Which is really surprising in a lot of ways. Vallejo actually has some very good paint matches in its range. Vallejo have actually worked with external people. There's a guy on Fine Scale Modeler whose name I can't remember, but who did a bunch of research with the AFV colors and actually went over to Germany and found some of the original records and got them to produce liters of, because you have to order liters of paint, to the original specs of like RL 7028 and stuff. And he gave all that information to Vallejo. This is like back in 2017 or something, maybe earlier. So actually they have some really good matches. But there's some really interesting things. And yeah, it's a bit of a minefield, the whole paint thing. I'm speaking with Casey via email, obviously. The way that you look at paints, like for one thing, RGB. Nobody should use RGB. RGB is a terrible, terrible system for reproducing color. It's kind of the last possible resort. Yeah. But nobody knows that really. I didn't know it until I started doing research, and that's only because of my particular scientific bent and all those things. The average modeler just accepts what most manufacturers give them, and then wonders why each manufacturer has a different shade for instance, RLMO2. Now, of course, there's accuracy to the original paint, and then there's scale effect, which some people believe is a thing and some people don't. I do. There's enhanced contrast, there's different lighting conditions. The chap who did all the research on the AFB paints, for instance, doesn't believe in mimetic paint. So mimetic paint, and a lot of the German paints are spoken of as mimetic. Mimetic basically means that it changes its appearance in lighting conditions, which is absolutely a thing. It's not, he was talking about, it's all about how the brain interprets things. The brain does interpret a lot of stuff. I've mentioned that in my videos. But mimetic paint, basically, if you have the spectrum of a paint, that is how it absorbs in different wavelengths, which is different colors of light. So absolutely, a paint can look different in different paint shades because of its absorption spectrum. Nothing to do with the brain, purely on what it's absorbing. It can absorb more red light or more blue light, which will change the apparent shade. Yeah. Your eyes then look at it and will interpret it, but a lot of that is because it's absorbing different wavelengths of light. That's a physics process. It's nothing to do with biology. So, no worries, John. Drop in if you can. And Michael, I hope you're getting better soon. Yep, get some rest, definitely. Hopefully see you Monday. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to make airfix and chill. I know. So Mario, yeah, the old testers, I think it was Model Master paint, wasn't it, that they had? They did have really good paint matches. I think it's also one of the only companies at the time, I'm thinking back in the 90s, late 90s, that did things like RLM 72 and 73 for Luftwaffe naval subjects. Is it Luftwaffe naval, or are they just naval? Don't know. But German stuff like the Condor and things. Yeah, I still have some of that Model Master paint, and it's pretty good, And that must be, I mean, God, that's like 25 years old now, at least. So why don't manufacturers use federal standard? Because a lot of colors, and I don't know if you're American, rubbish modeler, but federal standard doesn't cover everything. Yeah. So the federal standard is great if you're doing modern subject, right? Because they do cover this. But even like the old World War II stuff isn't necessarily the same, because you have the AMS standard, I believe. So that's why people don't use federal standard, because not all paints are in federal standard or have a good match with that, including a lot of the Luftwaffe and German armor stuff for World War II. The British stuff doesn't have good federal standard matches, so then it's compromise, so that's why they don't use federal standard. Having said that, I would love to see manufacturers both paint and model quote federal standard, British standard, RAL, whatever standards were used for the actual paint on the subject quoted in their instructions, rather than this uses our paint range number, whatever. It's just like, yeah, but I don't want to use your paint range necessarily, and you can't force me to. I know you want me to, but just giving me your reference isn't more likely to make me want to do that. I also missed this question. What was the issue with the AK book first edition? So they kind of sensationalized a lot of, well, it was the whole book. I can't remember what it was called now. Let me just check. AK. Condemnation was what it was called. So and this is why I was saying before that the concept of the thing was that they asked modelers to produce little dioramas using obviously AK products of very controversial subjects, conflict subjects. So I think they had the Somalia genocide, they had the Holocaust, they had like US troops executing Vietnamese, pretty strong stuff. The idea of it was to shine a light on and question the nature of war and things. And that concept I get, but they kind of sensationalized it. So they had like a skull in the background of, like watermarked on one of the, one of the Holocaust ones or whatever it was, and it's just like, so it came across as crass and like in poor taste, almost like we're going to make money out of all of these horrible things that happened and kind of sensationalize it like it's a horror film. That's how it was presented in the first edition. Second edition, they kind of turned it back. They never apologized for what they did. They just changed it. So that's why a lot of people kind of backed off AK, because they thought that was out of order. Now, again, you pay your money, you take your choice. I think they could have probably apologized for, we were trying to do this, but we kind of put our foot in it, and but I mean, the profits from it, I believe, went to a charity, maybe Amnesty International, I can't remember. So there was a lot of emotion around it, a lot of mixed feelings. And again, it wasn't a great optic in the end for AK, because at the end of the day, it was for them a marketing exercise. Thanks, Julian. Rally the troops. Brit in Chechnya. Okay, that's an interesting combination. Yeah, the thing is, you won't get a universal standard because, universal standards aren't even common in other important areas of life, right? Like science, which is why we end up with probes crashing into Mars at 10 times the speed they were supposed to go, because we can't decide on using metric for science, on an international level. So yeah, I don't see a bunch of commercial companies deciding to use a universal standard, even though it would be very useful. One of the things that not really surprises me, but again, through my own journey and speaking to Casey and things, LAB is the standard used in color space, for paint and fabrics and everything else. So why don't they use that? It's very defined, because they also quote it under certain lighting conditions and stuff, because you have to eliminate all that. And you can put out definitive values for existing standards, and then match to those. But I guess what's the impetus for them? Don't know. So the Ammo Atom paint, I must say, on my first inspection, I'm not terribly impressed with. Given all of the hype that Mig Ammo have put around them, they behave like lacquers, and they don't. They're decent enough. They've got good color density, but they still required a couple of coats. They take ages to dry, so very unlike lacquers in that respect. They don't self-level at all, in the way that that lacquers do, and so they do get some texture, and they do leave an odd finish. So some of it is matte and some of it is gloss on the same paint sheet. I'm not talking about like different paints. So, I mean, they come in a 20ml bottle. The bottle's quite nice. You know, you get a decent volume of paint. They come with a paintball mixer, which is good. Would I go out and buy them? Is the definitive thing. There's nothing in them that makes me think, yeah, these are my next go-to paints. Of all the paints I've tried of late, outside of ICM, because obviously I'm very keen on them, the AK 3rd Gen are the ones that I would go with, which, of course, if ICM are AK paints, makes sense, right? So, yeah. Alex, why have you trimmed on the left-hand side of your moustache? I think it's just the way that I'm sitting and the angle. It's not deliberate. Maybe it's just longer. Maybe it's just grown more that way. I don't know. It's not a deliberate thing. Maybe I just was so tired with doing all the packing stuff. I trimmed one side and not. I'm way behind on trimming. So, yeah, it's it's a good question. I don't have an answer for it because it's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be an asymmetric beard or anything. Okay, may have caused a controversy, but at the same time, they brought to the forefront not all armors had to be a battle, that we could also produce ones that make good statements. Yeah, yeah. And as I said, the original intent, I think, of the book was an interesting idea. Yeah. And that, I mean, it was a bit artsy, you know, a bit pretentious, a little bit in the way it was just like how art can, you know, evoke emotion and all this kind of stuff. It's just like, yeah, okay. But I guess it's also that kind of thing. It's like, yes, you can, and as kind of a statement piece, then yeah. But most people don't want to do that. You know, most people don't want to evoke the kind of emotions that those images brought up. You know? But it did get a lot of people talking. So yeah. Question: would you all say for water-based paints the AK 3rd Gen is currently the best, ICM aside? It's really difficult, I think, to say what is quote unquote best. It depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking to spray you know, aqueous acrylics, I would always go to Tamiya, because Tamiya are aqueous. They are water soluble. Yes, they contain a lot of alcohol and alcohol derivative products, but they're still aqueous emulsions. They're not, you know, lacquers. So for airbrushing, I would go to Tamiya every single time. They don't have the color density, but for airbrushing, actually, that can be an advantage because you can get nice, thin, semi-transparent, translucent layers. So that allows you to do undershading, or you can do overshading. Gives you a lot of versatility. They spray very nicely because they've got a lot of alcohol in them. So yeah, if I was airbrushing, I would go to Tamiya, even though I really like ICM paints for hand brushing. So yeah, I mean, AK 3rd Gen, they're nice, but again, they don't spray as well as Tamiya. They got some nice paints and great coverage. And again, if I was hand brushing, AK 3rd Gen is really good. No worries, Jesse. Not a problem. Good to see you. I'm grateful that people can come on. I don't expect you to slavishly stay right till the bitter end, unless you want to. I'll probably be finishing up in 10 minutes anyway. As I say, it's going to be a truncated session today because I need to get back to, well, first of all, I need to go to the shop because it doesn't close till 11, bizarrely, and do all that. And then I've got to do more packing. So, you know, God knows what time I can get to bed. Maria has a very good question. We are talking about the color coat, but I think the primer is just as important. So in some ways, the primer is more important, and in other ways, the primer is irrelevant, right? So without a good primer coat, you don't get good adhesion to the plastic, and then everything else you do is for naught, right? Because it's going to flake off and it won't look good. If you've got very opaque top coat paint, it doesn't really matter what that primer is, whether it's black, grey, white, pink, whatever. It doesn't really matter, because after a couple of coats, the opacity, high density pigments will cover it up and you won't get any effect from that. Again, going back to the Tamiya, where you've got slightly less opacity, that allows you to play with your pre-shading, play with the primer colors. So you can put a mid-tone primer like a grey on. You can panel line in black. You can do some scribbling with white and different greys and other stuff to give different textural variations, and then do little shades over to get that, impression of variances in hue. And we talk about accuracy of paint, and I always think it's amusing listening to people talk about, well, that's not the right color. It's like, well, okay, you get the perfect color. I can't show you them because they're all packed away, but some of the Messerschmitts I had from the RLM one were around until earlier, and they look wrong. And they look wrong because it's a flat color. There's no weathering, there's no marbling, there's no stippling or anything. And that's not how aircraft look, right? Even just a plain surface has different textural variations on it. So pre-shading or post-shading will change the value of that color. So it won't be the original color anyway. So again, I always talk about creating the illusion of the realness, how it looks, rather than, accuracy, because accuracy is misleading. You can have something that's super accurate and it looks wrong. So primer it's one of the reasons I really like outlaw paints. So again, talking about lacquers now, because you don't need primer, because the paint itself is acting as a primer. And that's because they're hot, right? So they bind to the plastic. I'm going to do a bit on a video on this, actually. I was thinking about it today. But the analogy I would use is, you can think of acrylics, aqueous acrylic emulsions. The acrylic itself has already polymerized, right? So actually what you end up is a big long chain, the acrylic binder. Think of it like a piece of wet spaghetti, right? That's what it is. An acrylic paint on the molecular level is a saucepan of wet spaghetti in water. And what you do when you put it onto a model is effectively you're throwing wet spaghetti at it. And if you all know that, when spaghetti is al dente, it sticks to the wall when you throw it. That's how you test it's ready. And basically, all of those long strands tangle up together, and that's what makes it stick, and it's how it dries. And then it dries out and it goes hard, just like spaghetti does if you throw it on a worktop. And it will stick to the worktop because of that, right? But if you chisel at it, it'll come off, and it'll come off in big pieces. It's the same with acrylic paints, because they don't actually bind to the plastic, just like spaghetti doesn't bind to your worktop. It's sort of glued on with starch and itself, which is like the binder. Acrylics is essentially, if you melted the top of your work surface slightly and then stuck the spaghetti into it, then it's never coming off. And that's kind of what acrylic lacquers do. The lacquer slightly melts that. I mean, very slightly. We're talking on a molecular level again, unless you really flood it, in which case you can melt your, very hot lacquers can melt your plastic. And then, it's the same mat of tangled spaghetti. That's what most paints look like on that molecular level. But it's anchored, like kelp. Oh, Andy, new member. Thank you, sir, and much appreciated. Subsorted and a new member. Remember, Modelmas is coming the 13th. I don't know what it'll be, but hopefully I'll be able to get a post up. It's going to be a hectic day. Oh, Moreton Bay Modelling. Oh, can't say that. Moreton Bay Modelling. Welcome. Yeah, Outlaw paints are really, really good. If you've not tried lacquer paints before, and I've used SMS paints as well, and other lacquer-based paints. The great thing about Outlaw is the pigment density. And actually, they have very even particle size distribution as well. I can tell you that because I've done the Hegman gauge thing, which is one of the reasons that they spray nicely. Because if you imagine, like spraying, if you could imagine using a funnel, and if you pour a bunch of different sized rocks into a funnel, it's going to jam up, right? If you pour in a load of ball bearings, all of the same size, they flow through. And that's kind of one of the points with particle size, right? And particle size ranges in airbrushing. So having a very even and nice grind. Obviously, if you pour little 3mm ball bearings through a funnel or like big 10mm ones, you're more likely to block it up with the 10mm ones. So a smaller grind, a finer grind, gives you a better finish. As an interesting aside, Sky Type S, RAF Sky Type S, is kind of no such thing, right? Which was a controversial statement for some people. The Type S wasn't to do with sky. The color sky, often referred to as duck egg blue or duck egg green or various duck egg grey, even though those were actually other colors. There was a lot of crossing over of terminology in World War II, which made it very confusing what the actual colors were sometimes. But sky was the color. Type S was actually the surface finish. And basically Type S meant it was ground to a finer particle size, which gave it a semi-gloss finish. So that is Type S. So you could have Dark Earth Type S, but it kind of became synonymous with sky. So Sky Type S is just like something that people think of as a color now, whereas really what they're describing is a color and a finish. So just an interesting aside. One of the things I learned during my research on the RAF colors about Type S paints. It doesn't actually really help you from a modeling point of view, but it's interesting, I think. So, Chris, I can't say your second name. I'm sure it's not actually that. But Chris, welcome. Glad to have you, and look forward to going on to Modelmas, potentially winning a 3D printer. I was originally going to put everybody that participated in the prior 12 days, 11 days, into the final, but then I thought not everybody necessarily wants to win a resin 3D printer because, resin 3D printers are messy. I'll tell you that up front, which is one of the reasons I think it's important I state that it hasn't been used, right? Because otherwise resin gets everywhere. So yeah, it smells. Resin smells. Some people get affected by that more than others. I'm not particularly affected, even though I got pretty sensitive lungs and skin and stuff. Somehow resin doesn't really bother me. But yeah, I thought, well, not everybody wants that, so I'm going to keep it the same as all the others. You will, as long as you sub to the channel, and if you're a channel member, you get extra entries. Obviously, you share, post, comment with your share, then you'll be entered. So I'll just keep it nice and simple, keep it open, just same as everything. So the printer is actually currently boxed up downstairs with a couple of other of my printers ready to go to the new house on Friday. So it's safe. So it is protected, and I know where it is. That's important, because if I don't, that could be awkward. Right, we are coming up to 1/2 the hour, so I'm going to end at this point. But if anybody has any insights into let's call it the Spanish paint focus. I'd love to hear. Please do comment on the recording of this video, the stream below, and yeah, also whether you think, are you going to buy Vallejo paints during this strike? Or I should say, are rather than is. Are the concerns that the workers have about safety and harassment worthy of us taking notice as modelers and trying to influence Vallejo's actions there to get that sorted? As I say, I think the pay is another thing. I think that's separate, really. For me, the big thing is everybody should have a safe place to work, right? Some jobs are inherently more dangerous than others, but generally they are paid pretty well for that. Deep sea diver, for instance, test pilot, those kinds of things. Making paint, I don't think, is one of those. You should expect to go home with all your fingers if you're making paint. And you should expect, especially if you're a female worker, not to be harassed, So, yeah, just give me your thoughts on whether you think that's something that, is worthy of the community actually getting involved in. But thank you all. This will be the last of these streams from this room. So last time you'll see this, I'm not quite sure when you'll see or what you'll see in the next one, but I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in that. And fingers crossed for my move and that I make it. And I'll see you all anon. Have a good one, everyone. Cheers.